Thank you to Manny for having us here this evening. So thank you, Manny, for inviting us. Without further ado, introduce yourself.
All right, thank you. I'm Matt from Heinz Marketing. It's 7:15, 7:20. Many of you, if you're in sales, you've probably been working for 11 or 12 hours at this point, so I figured PowerPoints was a very bad idea at this point of the day. And honestly, when I saw like the likely size, I figured this is a great size group to just make this more of a discussion, right? I'm happy to kind of share what we're seeing in the market that's working and how something like social selling, I think, has evolved over the last couple of years from being kind of a frothy new thing to really becoming in the best organizations a integral but integrated part of the overall selling experience. And we are really big on reinforcing the fact that the tools are not your strategy, right? The technology is not a strategy, it's an implementation of your strategy. And one of the most important things that a lot of companies miss is the storytelling behind all of the things that we consider prospecting activities. And I'm not talking, I'm a math marketer. I'm not a what some people derogatively call them the arts and crafts marketing department, right? That is focused on making sure the trade show booth looks good. It's always 30 degrees to the left. I mean, so that stuff's important. But when I think about storytelling, I think about compelling someone to take action, right? The beginning stages of a buying journey. You mentioned sort of like the status quo. What are you doing to challenge the way someone thinks today? What are you doing to reframe in the language of the challenger sale the way someone is approaching a problem? How are you quantifying a problem that they did or didn't know that they had? And then once you get to that point, I think the most important and the most difficult part of the sales process is the next step, which is getting someone to commit to change. Not commit to you, but to commit to a change for themselves. If you had to simplify the buying process and the sales process to two stages, they would probably be 1, believe, and 2, believe in us, right? And most organizations flip those, if not ignore the first part entirely. Thanks for downloading the white paper. Would you like to see a demo? Who's answered yes to that question, right? You go from step A to step F, right, without really building any context into the conversation. And counterintuitively, sometimes with some sales teams, that you get where you want to go faster in 3 steps than 1. I know you want the demo. I know BDR teams are focused on getting the appointment. Right? But unless someone knows why they're taking that appointment, they're not going to show up. Or they're not going to accept it in the first place. Or they might accept it just to get you off the phone and then not even write it down and forget the conversation even happened. So, once the best sales reps I know introduce what they do as late in the conversation as possible. The conversation is about prospect, their issues, their needs. Before you get into a buying cycle, stage 0 is attention. What are you doing to earn and keep the prospect's attention? I get many people that say cold calling is dead. Well, anyone that says anything is dead, as far as I'm concerned, is trying to sell you what they now think is alive. Right? So, beware those that say things are dead. Well, if cold calling is dead, then cold email is dead, cold social is dead, cold LinkedIn is dead. Every relationship you have starts cold. What are you doing to provide value to make that person interested in spending a little more time with you? Think about a good elevator pitch. You do not have 80 stories on an elevator ride for an elevator pitch, nor do you need in the first conversation with someone to explain everything about what you do. Unless you're doing one call closes in B2B, you can afford to take steps. And sometimes, like I said, those taking 2 or 3 steps can get you somewhere faster than trying to shoehorn someone into a demo right away. If you've got an elevator pitch, assume you have 2 or 3 stories. Assume you're going from the ground floor to here, right? What can you say in 1 or 2 stories that's going to get someone to say when the door opens up, they don't run screaming to get away from you, but they say, "That's interesting. Walk with me and tell me more." Right? And you go to a trade show, and what do you do when you walk the floors of a trade show? Your number 1 rule of a trade show as you're walking the floor is to avoid eye contact with booth staff, right? You never want to make eye contact with someone in a booth because now all of a sudden they're going to say something and they're going to talk, right? So you're walking straight line, not pretending no one's there. So your number 1 job as a prospector at a booth is to master what we call the gate stopper, GAIT stopper. Right? What's that one thing you can say that says something? Right? Think about that when you're leaving voicemails as a BDR, right? If someone's listening to their voicemail, they're probably paying attention to other stuff. What in that voicemail, in the first 6 to 8 seconds of that voicemail, gets them to stop typing, to stop clicking? Right? What in that moment gets them to think a little differently and associate that moment with you and or your brand? That's job number one. Right? You do that, you earn the fact that they might actually read and respond to your next email. You earn the fact that they might actually click on that remarketing ad that they happen to see remarketing later. You earn the fact that when they do see you at a trade show in a month, in a quarter, in a year, they will actually stop. Because there's something that you have started to build. You've started to build equity in value with that prospect. Now, would you like to have a half-hour discovery call with that prospect in the first call? Yes. But maybe you just get one story in an elevator ride first. And then you have an opportunity to just like and retweet some of the stuff they do on social. Your initial social interactions aren't about you either. They're about them. Right? Figure out what they like. Show that you care. The amount of time it takes you to click like on a tweet is a fraction of the incremental value that you provide to that person. They look at that and say, wow, I remember that voicemail. I remember that person I talked to at the trade show. I remember that conversation I had. I can't believe they're following my stuff. They click like. That's really cool. Like that, I mean, literally that may happen in like a split second, but the impact that has on the impression and the equity you're building with that person is real. It's far more than that split second. And it's compounded as they start to see you elsewhere. So I think those that are doing social selling well, it's not just about social. It's not a replacement of the phone. It's not a replacement of other prospecting techniques. But there's lots of research that shows that the more you diversify your channels in front of an audience you care about, the greater the velocity and speed at which you're getting to the point of familiarity, trust, credibility, and interest in responding. Like that's just the way our brains work, right? I mean, if you see the same message 5 times in email versus once in email, once in social, once in a voicemail, your ability to recognize and remember and just internalize that message increases significantly. And look, I mean, let's not pretend that social media is going to get you better response rates than somewhere else. I mean, to a certain extent, social media is like driving by someone's house at 40 miles an hour and trying to throw something in the mailbox. You're going to miss most of the time. Now, the problem with email is it's in the email inbox every freaking time, right? And so they see it every time. Now, social, you can get away with more frequency because they're not always going to get in there. You can't get away with less quality because you don't know which of those is going to hit the mark, which time they're actually going to check their mailbox. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. And then eventually they associate what's in the mailbox with your car. And eventually they start recognizing your car as it drives by, even if they don't check the mailbox. No, this is all a good thing, right? It sounds a little stalkerish, I realize. But that's not, with social, like these are fleeting moments that are not directed at you, they're directed by you. They're passing you by. And some of those things you see, and some of those things you start to notice more when you recognize there's consistent value coming from someone. Someone asked me at an event recently, they said, so like let's say you're doing this, like how important is it that that message comes, from the CEO of the company or some like executive of the company versus a sales rep? Like, everyone in this room is a prospect. You're all prospects for somebody. Think about your day, right? Unless you're checking email right now, which if you're doing it's totally fine. Like you've got emails piling up right now. There's something else work-related you should be doing. There's probably something at home you should be doing right now. Laundry, I don't know. So your brain's thinking about all these other things, right? And you're crazy busy, and you're bombarded with other bad salespeople, and all of a sudden someone happens to like your content or someone happens to leave you a voicemail. Are you really thinking about whether that's a sales rep or the CEO of the company? Now, so it doesn't matter who it is, but there's value in consistency around that person. We don't write checks to buildings. Right? In B2B, too often we get enamored with the idea that we're putting a logo on our wall. We are, right? You want to sell to Amazon. Amazon is not going to buy from you. Some dude at Amazon is going to buy from you. Right? And that dude may be responsible for X and Y, P&L, whatever, but may also be like a huge, Cougar football fan. And may love, going, do their annual trips to Legoland with the family. So, connecting with people based on stages of the buying journey and their work interests is important. First touch with a prospect, I wouldn't immediately start commenting on their kids. That's true. I've had that happen. But those insights become part of the conversation, don't they? right? I mean, there's a Steve Richard, who you mentioned earlier, he's got a process called, he runs a company called Foresight. He actually runs a handful of companies. I don't know, he's like 23 years old. He's like, he's the next, whatever. So he's, Foresight is one of his previous companies, and one of his tactics is what he calls the 3x3 method. Spend up to 3 minutes and find up to 3 things interesting or in common with the person you're about to call. Don't spend 25 minutes researching a 25-second voicemail. So that's what's going to happen most of the time you're calling, let's be honest. Up to 3 minutes, up to 3 things. A Facebook search and a Google search probably get you there in about 90 seconds, if not less. And it can be something you have in common, like we both love baseball, we both like bacon, we both have kids. I mean, and you can think about like what you actually want to bring up, like, hey, we both like, hey, if we're both voting in this election, we've got different people. Let's maybe stay away from that for a little while. But even if it's not something that you have in common, ask them a question. If it's in their bio or in their social feed, they probably want to talk about it. If you go far enough into our website and you find my bio, it says I live in Kirkland in a 105-year-old farmhouse with my wife, 3 children, and 7 chickens. And every once in a while, someone will say like, what's the deal with the chickens? What I don't want to talk about is whatever cloud platform bullcrap they actually want to talk about and sell me, but I'll talk about chickens. And now all of a sudden they've got me talking, right? They've got my attention. And also, like in my head, I'm like, they spent that small amount of time and customized that message just a little bit, and they got me talking. It's in my bio, we got like chickens. Actually, we no longer have 7, we have 6 chickens. The coyote got Pickles. Pickles is gone. But the rest of the chickens. Well, there's not. Yeah, not Pickles, but Pickles the chicken. Well, and what's disappointing about that is Pickles was, I can't remember the breed, but the breed's known as the Easter chickens because they actually lay kind of blue and purplish eggs. So they were the more colorful of the eggs, where the rest of them tend to be like shades of tan and anyway.
See, you like eating.
You like chickens.
This is maybe the first enterprise sales meeting where we kind of delved into the...
Well, don't you get me started. We're in the process of buying the property behind us, and if we could do that in the city, lets us cut down a couple trees, we're getting feeder pigs, and then it gets real. No, you guys, you separate them.
To go with the goats.
No, we're not the goats yet, but that's coming next too. Right? You get the goats, and you have to put like an electric fence around the pigs, because otherwise they'll get out. But you no longer have yard waste anymore, right? You just throw it all, that's the slop day.
You're just not
Dream big, guys. Dream big.
Yeah, so I digress. So yeah, I mean, so it's funny. Whenever you wind me up to talk about social selling, I end up talking a lot more about storytelling. I end up talking a lot more about buyer's journey. I end up talking a lot more about investing the time and the energy to care about your prospects, to lean into insights that aren't always about the buying process, but help you build real trust and connection and credibility with people. I mean, we lose sight because we've got such great tools that help us scale our sales processes and do things a little better and deeper and earlier in the buying process. We're still people sell to people. I think relationships are still an incredibly important part of selling, but it's changed significantly, right? Like my dad sold Caterpillar tractor equipment for 35 years. He worked for a cat dealer in Northern California. And he's selling 6-figure tractors. Like that's not a one-call close, right? So he's building relationships with contractors and construction companies, and he's doing golf trips and NASCAR races and all this stuff that enterprise sales reps have been doing forever. So like he really invested in the relationship sale. Well, in today's predictable revenue specialization world, you don't have that time. And I won't argue against. I have no means of arguing against the specialization world that actually works plenty well. What I don't like is the impersonal way we go about that. When someone sends me an email today and says, "Hey, wondering if you could introduce me to the person at your company that's responsible for X," like, well, that might have worked 10 years ago when LinkedIn didn't have all that information on it. Right? Do your own damn research, salesperson. Right? But it implies a level of it's impersonal. I could argue it's a little insensitive because they're not respecting my time. It feels like a template. It sounds like a template. One of the things I love, the more complex your sales process, the more specialization you're doing, the more junior the reps you're hiring into a BDR role, whether they're young or just inexperienced or don't have the skill set of a more senior rep. And this isn't meant to be a pitch for outreach, but the more important tools like outreach are, right? Where they create the environment for that consistency. The environment to do the same right thing over and over again, but doing that, the more you invest in process, the more you invest in systems and tools that allow repeatability and scalability, the more time and effort it allows you to be creative and personal. If you can make it so the reps don't have to remember the next step in the sales process for one of their 8,000 leads they're following up with, if you don't have to force the reps to rewrite the email over and over and over again and write it badly and off message and not write it in a target way to that persona at this stage of the buying journey, take that off of their plate and automate that. Make it so they know what the next step is and they've got a starting template for how to do it. And let them invest a fraction of the time they used to spend doing all that themselves, fraction of that time figuring out whether it's chickens or wazoo or whatever it is to inject into that message, whether it's the voicemail or the email or whatnot. Right? So now you've got the best of both worlds. Now you've got a system that is repeatable and scalable, and once you figure out the right system for you, somewhat predictable. But you also are able to personalize those conversations to each individual person. You as a business are looking at the BDRs you have, the number of calls you want to make, and the conversion rates. You can make a spreadsheet saying anything. But it's easy to forget that those numbers are us. And we're still going through and thinking about that and evaluating who we work with the same way we always have. And I argue that you have less margin of error today. There's so many more touch points in front of us. So many more distractions for our time. So many more screens in front of us that are screaming for our attention. There's no prospect discovery 3-martini lunch. No one's going to take time for that. They may if you invest in the relationship and you get to the point where they feel like that might be a good conversation. Not only because they want to learn more about what you know, not about your product, but about your industry, so they might feel better, but also because you both have chickens and they're wondering how the hell you keep yours alive in the winter. We don't always buy the best product. A lot of times we buy from our favorite. And that favorite can be both the rep you're talking to as well as the content that comes from that company, as well as just the feeling you get from that company. The values you have as a company, your ability to help your people invest in relationships, even if you're doing it through different channels and different means and at different speed than my dad did, that still stands out. They will give you the benefit of the doubt when you can invest in that. So I don't want to sit here and talk for an hour. Anybody? If anyone, I'd love to hear other perspectives on that, either as from a supply and demand standpoint, right? Either from your experience as sellers in trying to sort of make sense of the combination of channel, social, process, customization, as well as examples of yourself as receivers of it. What stands out to you as examples that have been terrible? I collect terrible. We have a whole inbox of the terrible stuff that we get. We were talking earlier about the gif of the alligator.
Yeah, we were
right?
going to do a book later.
Oh my gosh, I did
That could be a bestseller.
I have a deck. I did a presentation at a Terminus conference this summer, and my topic was sales development, email best practices. But I couldn't help myself. I had to start with the worst practices, and it was the best part. It was so much fun. And they were all real. Terminus made me actually scratch out names of people. I was going to say you said it. Cool. I'll leave it in. So yeah, I would love to hear examples, or if you guys have any questions, I'd be answering questions as well.
Maybe I'll kick it off with. I think a lot of companies want to try and implement a social selling program. Mm-hmm. What does that really mean? Ultimately.
So some of you may be old enough to remember when the internet first started accepting advertising, and there were websites, and then all of a sudden there were these rectangular boxes at the top of websites, and it was banner ads, right? And all of a sudden, ad agencies were not capable of creating banner ads. You had to go hire a banner ad agency. There were companies that merged. They were like, we do banner ads, right? We understand the internet. The internet's totally different. And it is. It's different than a magazine. It's different than a trade show. But if you are segmenting, if you are separating and decentralizing the people that are able to speak to your customer, that are understanding what they care about. Like, at best, you're confusing people. At worst, you're wasting money because you've got competing campaigns in the marketplace. So, like, I look at social, and then I kind of look at the same way as, like, account-based marketing. It's like, oh, we got to do account-based. Sure. Doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So social selling will have reached an appropriate level of maturity when we just call it selling. It's just part of selling. So that doesn't preclude the need for social selling training, right? These are different tools with different rules. There's different etiquette that I think is appropriate with a social tool like a Twitter or a LinkedIn than, like an email or the phone. And you see evidence of the opposite of that all the time, right? Someone sends you a LinkedIn request, and then 2 minutes later they're like, "Hi, I want to pitch you on my product." Like, that's not social selling. I realize you're using a social channel to sell, but I don't know how you do it, right? So I think that there's a different way you use in-person meetings than you use the phone, than you use a trade show, than you use it. So I think social is part of that. So helping people understand how that works, but it is a mistake if you treat it as an isolated event. GE has rebranded their inside sales team as digital sales. And I don't like that either, because it implies only digital channels. But it's closer, right? Because I think, I don't like the idea of inside versus field. I don't know that really exists anymore. You got a lot of people that traditionally were field sales that can do a lot of the same kind of work without having to travel as much. Let alone the fact that their prospects no longer want them in the office either, right? They don't want the 3 martini lunch. They don't want the dog and pony. They're like, video call, let's get it done, or we move it along, bucko, right? So I think social channel training is important. What's more important to me is that we help our sales reps understand their customers better. You go into most new hire trainings and most sales kickoffs, and they are full of information about your product, your company, and your sales process.
Right.
Most of the time, there's very little insight into the industry you're selling into, the people you're about to talk to. If you're doing enterprise selling, CEB says there's on average 6.8 members of the internal buying committee. So 6.8 people that are actively or semi-actively involved in deciding whether or not you get to do business with that company. What roles do they have? How are those roles different? What are they, they all be buying the same product at the end of the day, but how do you get finances attention, operations attention, the real estate, the facilities department's attention? There's a company earlier today that one of the key stakeholders and potential roadblocks of the deal was compliance. So if you don't position that message right to compliance, they will kill your deal because they want everything to be as safe as possible. But if you could reframe the conversation and say, no, this isn't a safety thing, this is a mitigator of future risk, maybe that gets them to the table in a way that's very different than the way you would talk to a CMO or a CTO or a CIO. Even little nuances about an industry, like in residential real estate. How many of you knew that realtor is an actual trademark? Right? So when you write realtor, technically, legally, it has to be all caps with an R, a little circle R at the end.
Huh.
They want you to write, and you go to the National Association of Realtors webpage. It is an all caps word. Now, in copy you see elsewhere, they're fine with you not shouting and lowercasing most of the words. But if you write realtor with a lowercase r and send that to a real estate agent or anyone in the real estate business, you don't look credible. I can't. We've had clients in real estate. I can't tell you how many fights I've had with copywriters. They say look at my style guide. It says lowercase r. I said, please capitalize it. The association is the National Association of Realtors. Most of us, when we see an acronym, we want to pronounce the acronym. You want to call it NAR, right? They pronounce it NAR. They spell it out, right? If you don't know that, as a sales rep, if you know your product and you know your features, and I can walk you through a demo, and once I get you to this stage, I click these buttons in Salesforce and I move you along, hey, realtor, you going to NAR? You going to NAR conference this year? Right? So we fail our reps when we don't teach them about the customers they're selling into. When we don't teach them at least the commonalities, the 80% that they can assume about people in different roles and have that conversation.
So in this process, is there a way to teach the inside reps, external reps, that lingo or that stuff that you can kind of get to?
Yeah, but it's also, go ahead.
It's got to be regional, right? So they should know that NAR is whatever.
Yeah.
But like Portland is Cooch Street, not Couch. There's that stuff.
Yeah.
But is there a way that the guy that's sitting in San Francisco who's calling in to Portland says, hey, you're on Couch Street?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think people that are regional, like, probably people calling from out of state give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, right? But if you say, hey, have you ever been to Sequim or that little town called Puliulialu? Wasn't there an ad campaign a couple of years ago about it was like a local bank and they were making fun of out of state banks and it's like, yeah. So what do you think of Puliulialu? So I think it is important. Like those little things matter. I mean, they imply that you have either you get it or you've taken the time, or the opposite, which is like let's say you don't get credit for knowing how to pronounce swim. It's a negative point if you don't, right? So I think it's got to be a priority in training, but it also can't be like, okay, we did it at sales kickoff, we're done. Right? Like, I mean, this happens with best practice sharing all the time. Someone's got a great idea. Hey, can you share that at the Friday meeting? Awesome, right? So they get up at the Friday meeting, they talk about it. Well, if you were sick on Friday, you didn't get it. If you started next Monday, you didn't get it, right? So I think, when we've got, and this applies to product training and everything that normally goes into sales training. Just because it's in new hire training, just because it's sales kickoff, doesn't mean everyone's got it. Doesn't mean everyone's going to remember it. Doesn't mean it's going to become habit. So, giving people the opportunity to reinforce that behavior, to reward some of that behavior, call out people that did a really nice job building rapport in the first 2 seconds of the call to earn the next 8 minutes of the call, and then making sure you've got some way to sort of maintain that repository of information. I think marketing is failing the sales organization in most cases by not building personas, let alone sharing them with the sales organization. Marketing may say, well, we've got our personas, we've got our buying journey, and sales doesn't have it. So sales says, thanks for the white paper, we'd like to see a demo. Like, that doesn't work. And if they're going to come up with their alternatives, don't let us work in a vacuum. Share that information a little bit. Look, this is a lot easier said than done. It's easy for me to sit on my couch and talk about this. We're doing this work for clients across the country. There's a level to this that we're doing for ourselves. As we grow, we're trying to we're using Salesforce, we're using Marketo. I'm not just the president of the Harry Club for Men, I'm also a client. It's much better if you laugh. I get the nervous guffaw. It's not as good. I got it. Yeah, all right, good enough. Okay, so why are you laughing? Why is that funny? Whatever. Here's the question.
Yeah. So I've been part of a sales team that tried to roll out social selling, and I've noticed that and failed because the ROI is it's so far out there that as a sales rep we want that immediate reward, and I think that's why we end up getting lazy and sending 45 emails and say, will you respond to me? Will you respond to me? Have you gotten my email, right? But so I'm wondering what is a good way to either get sales reps into the mindset of playing the long game, or where can you get them started into social selling without just trying to dive in head first?
That's a really, really good question, and there's a couple things involved in that, right? One is if I'm hearing you right, saying what is the appropriate way to evaluate the efficacy of social selling in our organization?
Yeah.
Also, you asked the question of, it's sort of a different way of saying is how do I get more traction with prospects? Right? How do I make sense of the fact that I know prospects have their own buying cycle, but I got a quota to hit this week or today, right? And I got to get my response. So I'll take a shot. I'd love to, if anyone else has any sort of feedback on this, definitely chime in. I think, if we're looking at social selling in isolation to decide if social selling alone is valuable, I think it's a mistake. I think you have to look at it as a component of a multi-channel, multi-part prospecting effort. In assuming that it's the channel and not putting any time and attention into how you use the channel, what message you use around that, I think that's a test that's destined to fail. Also, I think we do our reps a disservice when we say your entire job is just to set up a demo without giving them context or training around how to do that. And then we also do a disservice when we position it as a demo as opposed to what the prospect really wants, which is something that is pre-demo. I mean, I think you could get an appointment if you get someone to the point where you've challenged their status quo enough to go deeper on that challenge. I mean, what if I told you that your job in that first 20 minutes of the phone call, first of all, rule number one, you're not allowed to talk about your product or service in that first call. Don't bring it up. If they ask you a direct question, you can talk about it. Otherwise, like, you have to have a conversation that's about them. It's about their needs. That you understand well enough from the persona that marketing has given you that you can ask certain questions that feed into that for that person. And what if I also told you that after that first call, after the first 20, 25 minutes on the phone, I want that prospect to lean back in their chair and say, wow, that was really good. I would have paid for that. I would have paid for that conversation. I would have paid for that insight. Now that is a high bar, right? I'm not gonna pretend that's something easy that we can just all come up with right now, right? But like, what is that for that prospect? What do you know about the industry that they don't know? What trends have you seen that are making a status quo something that's taking time on? You may not be able to get the demo and get the commitment to see your product until they not only have challenged and reframed what they're thinking, but they've also committed to change related to it. And even that, like I mentioned before, is a high bar. So, and this may or may not be something you can solve, right? But I think, if I've got a BDR that's setting appointments, I don't want those appointments always to be demos. I want them to be a deeper dive on that reframe. How do you earn the next call to get someone closer to committing to change? The later in the sales process you can bring up your product and service, the better. Because it just reinforces and digs deeper and builds more of that foundation of why they needed something in the first place. So again, those are really good questions, and those are not easy to solve questions. Part of the challenge here is we can all sit here and sing Kumbaya and say, yeah, we got to think of this is good, right? Then we got to go back to organizations where your manager and your manager's manager, they've got assumptions around how things are supposed to work. You've got a culture of sales and marketing that works together or not, right? And those are not easy things to change. Like, we can all read the same books and go to the same conferences and say this all makes sense and, say like this tool can solve for us. Well, now you got to roll it out. Now you got to get people to actually use it. That's going to replace time on something else. And are people willing to give up that time to spend time on your thing, right? Those are deep systematic cultural challenges.
I'll share something that happened in our Philadelphia group. So a gentleman who worked at, I believe it was Vonage Business, challenged us around, how do I incorporate social selling into my day where my manager wants me to do 200 calls? I said, you're in a tough environment, you're probably not going to change that mindset.
Yeah.
So if you really want to leverage this potential channel, you're going to have to do it on your own time. Find the time in the morning, after work, dedicate whatever, like 30 minutes, hour, whatever you can, and be prescriptive about it. Script it out. Figure out, okay, well, here's a process I'll do on a regular basis, which means here's maybe some content I'll share out via my various channels. Maybe I'll try and connect to some people who are influencers or people that seem important. But incorporate a message which is, again, about them and just wanting to learn more about who they are, what they're interested in. And not think about a strategy of pray and spray, not the whole thing, but do small numbers and see over time, maybe over a number of weeks or months, see if you're developing a following, if you're able to develop the connections, if you're able to get some conversation started. Because ultimately, on the social channel particularly, and in sales, particularly in enterprise space, we are playing a long game. And that's when you got to really internalize that a lot of your selling, even if you have to meet your quarterly goals, you also have to be thinking about your goals for the next 4 quarters. And when you start to think about those next 4 quarters, then you can start to potentially invest some amount of time to build up yourself, to build up your brand, to build up your connections, to build up some trust and credibility, so that when the time comes, you can probably introduce that ask. But if you do what I see all the time with people who want to send a connect request on LinkedIn, and then the very next message is, I want to sell you X, Y, and Z, you failed social selling 101. You have to think about that long term. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of these things aren't going to happen immediately. Maybe in a blue moon, it will come, but the real rewards happen when you are very systematic about it, and you know I can dedicate X amount of time during my day for these particular types of activities. I can monitor those, and then maybe I can convert those into potential deals.
I want to start a quick word because I need to run, but you'll be in good hands here with Brooke. I want to pivot on something that Matt said here in that, so what Matt said is exactly right. So even our own team right now, our emphasis is in storytelling. And how do you create a story that engages the user? So usually the most easily relatable activity between human beings is the ability to tell stories. I mean, the moment you tell a story, everybody sort of latches into the story, and then you're in the zone in which you can talk shop, and then from talking shop you can move on to selling. The selling is the ability for you to diagnose a problem and then solve it together with somebody else. And one of the things that we found so two things that I'll leave you guys here with. One is that without storytelling and having your story down, none of these other things matter. So you need to understand what is that your story is about, what is the story that you're listening from your customer, and get that out of the way. So you need to be really good at storytelling. Like, if you're getting no training from your manager, which is probably the case for the majority of salespeople, go look for storytelling advice. Like literally, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Go download the Moth Radio Hour from a podcast and just listen to it. Because it's literally 3 stories per podcast of people who win awards by telling stories. They make a living by telling stories. You will learn a lot from other storytelling. Just get good at storytelling. And figure out how your story fits in that storytelling cadence and just nail that.
Manny, say the name of the podcast.
It's Moth. M-O-T-H.
Moth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
Great
a
podcast.
This is Seattle. There's a lot of public radio listeners here, so I'm sure
Yes.
that you guys are
It's like 1 o'clock on
familiar with what I'm
Sunday.
talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you download the podcast and just listen to it on a regular basis, and it will get you better to be exposed to the other thing. The second thing that we did that is really, really different from many other companies that I've seen is that we so there's a ways to cut your market. So everybody needs to, so what Matt said, you need to do it at scale, and it's really hard, right, to create empathy at scale. So one short way of doing it is instead of cutting your customer segment by size or by industry or by whatever, is that look at the solution that you're trying to, look at the problem that you're trying to solve and cut it by that problem. So for instance, we sell a sales communication platform, right? So we sell a system of action. The way we cut our market used to be by size, used to be by industry, used to be whether you're tech or not, etc. And then as we examine the way that our sellers sell, we realize that there is this thing that we invented here called sales topology. Meaning you're either inbound or outbound, meaning you either have an SDR team or you don't, meaning your AEs are prospecting or they're not prospecting. Meaning that you have, there's a way that sales shops are set up. And like Dostoevsky said, every happy family is alike. And every happy family is unhappy in their own ways. So we look for the happy families and we look for commonalities. And we try to sell that, right? We capture it. And then we come to an unhappy family and tell them, look, this is how happy families look like. Would you like to be a happy family? It turns out nobody says no.
Yeah.
So if you're able to wrap the problem around a handful of commonalities, you will hit one. There's not that many unhappy families out there. So you just catalog them, create stories around them, and they'll go pitch that. And you'll be good.
How many of you thought crime and punishment was going to be quoted tonight?
And one of the things I've always observed about channels is like the social selling is just like another channel, right? Mm-hmm. But does it give you an advantage? Yes, because you're participating. So is it worth 2%? That 2% is 2 years from now,
Yeah.
40% on your quota because you get a big deal because you've been working on it for 2 years.
Well, I mean, there's an investment in all of this, right, that doesn't always immediately pay off.
It's gotta be.
You know, all sellers, but especially sort of early stage companies, like we're so impatient, like we want stuff to close now. Like we don't pay attention to our buyers' buying cycle. We know what our own is,
Yeah.
and that's what we shoehorn people into, and it simply doesn't work. Right? I mean, it's actually really frustrating hearing your challenges because I don't know how you go back to the office tomorrow and solve that. Right? I mean, you can evangelize it, but like I've seen many people in your position do that. They're like, yeah, just go make your 90 calls, right? I mean, and that's just so frustrating because that's just it doesn't work. And Mark's absolutely right. So, I think about this not just with social selling, but just with content. I've been creating content and curating content for 8 years now. And it's been working for a while, but it didn't work the first year. It didn't work the first month. It takes time to build that stuff up. Now, it doesn't mean, if you're going to do content, it's going to take 8 years. But, if you're going to invest in a content strategy to try to drive the right prospects, to get increased conversion rate at every stage of the buying process, to increase inbound leads, to differentiate yourself in the market, to create some thought leadership for yourself and your brand, that's not like turning on paid search. It just isn't. And it's a lot of work, and to do it right, and to do it consistently is a lot of hard work, and it's difficult to execute and maintain. And it's why most people don't do it, and why most people give up well before it starts to work. And so I wish I could tell you that this stuff was easy. For those of you that carry a quota, it's not. It just isn't. Yes?
Young man, I can't read your name tag from here. You are?
Nick.
Nick. So I looked around the room and I calculated that I'm the oldest guy here. Huh? So Nick, one day when I was 24 and a half years old, how old are you?
26.
Okay. I was younger than you are. I was out of law school for about 4 months, and I was working for a law firm, and the office manager in my law firm came in and plopped a Rolodex down on my desk. You know what a Rolodex is?
Yeah. Barely.
It's a digital thing.
I looked at the Rolodex, and I didn't know quite what it was, because I was really young. And the last time I'd seen one was in the law school library at Duke when I went to law school. And we used the Rolodex to have sort of like a mini card catalog. And I assumed that what was going to happen next was that I was going to be asked to go into the firm law library and write down book, title, author, publisher of all the books we had. Because I couldn't imagine any other use for this. And the office manager tore off the little 3x5 or whatever size it was, and threw it at me, and said that I was to write down first name, last name, company name, address, phone number, and something about everybody I talked to from that day forward. So I'm now 69 years old. I have 14,000 contacts in Outlook. I can tell you the day I met Matt Heinz. And I have all these nuggets.
About chickens?
About chickens. I know the bacon part, I've got the chickens. I know Matt lives in a farmhouse in Kirkland, has a wife, 3 kids, likes to grill, went to UW, is crazy about UW football.
He keeps talking about food football.
No, I didn't mean to say this. I know, but I feel like I always say Huskies.
No, he's a homer reason. But, as you listen to all these stories, number one, they're all anecdotes, okay? And then when people talk about the idea that it's a marathon, not a sprint, you need to understand that. You need to wrap your head around that. But what I was struck by when I was trying cases, which I tried 200 non-jury trials, 40 jury trials, is it was all about story. It wasn't about the facts. It wasn't about the law. It was about the story. Okay? And as somebody else was talking about, Manny was talking about, story. If you don't understand who you're talking to, and if you don't understand the story, and if you don't understand that this is a marathon and not a sprint, then you just stop, go back, and learn all three. And you have to be able to convey that and teach that and learn that and practice that. Because if you don't, you're going to be ordinary. You're not going to be special. And what I've learned in life is that the special people are the ones that are able to convey their ideas, are able to sell their thoughts, are able to close the deals, are able to win the case. You know, you got to be special. You can't be ordinary. You know, our society does not reward ordinary. It rewards special. And how are you special?
They all showed up tonight.
Ha!
I'm
We
just
have
saying,
it.
that was
On
yearly. I
a
don't know why you
miserable
showed
night,
tonight.
after you're walking my dog in the rain. No. Understand special. Why are you special? Because if you're not special, you're ordinary. If you're ordinary, you're in the pack. And you know, you see the guys running these races, and you see the guy winning, and then you see everybody in the pack, right? And nobody remembers the guys in the pack. Remember the guy? You know, I apologize. I don't mean to be, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They remember the guy they remember the person that breaks the ribbon, right? He gets all the press, all the glory, all the stuff. And those in the pack, they're in the pack. They're forgettable.
So do you feel like at some point you have to be prescriptive about those best practices? Like if somebody hadn't put the Rolodex and said, also make sure that you put something interesting on the note card, do you think you would have just picked up on that? Like, you know, when we talk to sales managers or other people that are trying to implement this across the teams, at some point do we just have to say, you need to connect with 100 people on LinkedIn today, and I know you're not going to see the immediate reward from it, but trust me, it's going to pay off down the road.
Yeah, I don't buy that argument. The argument that I buy is that routinely Matt Heinz gets links from me about articles. I send articles to Matt about anything that I see that I can associate with that Matt would find interesting. Bam, it goes out, and I built a product called ActiveWords, and I have an active word that calls thought. I type THOUT, and it says, saw this, thought you might be interested, you know, hope you enjoy it, regards Buzz, and it goes to Matt. And you know what happens? Matt sees that, and if Matt gets value from that, my stock rises. If Matt doesn't get value from that, he just hits delete. Because in Matt's world, there's very few people that are sharing with him ideas and best practices on a daily basis. If I'm one of them, you know, I'm a star, right? And he returns my calls. He actually sent me a note the other day that said, thanks for your tweet, want to send you our best practices marketing thing. And I said, absolutely. I haven't gotten it yet. I'm just teasing.
He has late nights, okay?
Yeah.
Well, but again, but it comes, I mean, what Matt's been talking about, what Manny's been talking about, and Mark's been talking about, we're talking about special.
Yeah.
What's the differentiator in your mind between ordinary and special? How do you take it up and step it up a notch? Okay?
Being young in your career,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, in being young in your career, you might only have like one manager at this point, and it's his way and only his way. He might not know other ways, right? So like being at networking opportunities like this is valuable for any salesperson, I think, because you get different ways about doing something, and they're preaching a practice. They're preaching what they think is right for their sales method. But like the things that you do on your off hours, like he said, like maybe 30 minutes before your day, that's when you're doing your social aspect. That's when you're doing your tweets. Like that's for your benefit of your career. Mm-hmm. And again, that's what's setting you apart. It's not necessarily what management is preaching to you and telling you what to do on your day to day. But it's just, again, what are you going to do that goes above and beyond? And it's your brand, it's your name, and how do you want to be depicted by your customer base?
She's exactly right. And I will tell you another little anecdote. On the fourth floor, or fifth floor above here, is a guy named Jim Weber. He runs Brooks Running. And Brooks Running is owned by Warren Buffett, owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And I was having coffee with Jim one day, and I said, what's Warren Buffett like? I've never met Warren Buffett. I've heard him speak. What's he like? And he said, totally fascinating. He said, in that when I know 3 times a year I'm going to meet with Warren. 3 times a year he's going to meet with me and talks about Brooks and what we're doing and how we're going to go from 600 million to $1 billion, okay? He said, I know that before I meet with Warren Buffett, I have to lock myself in a room, I have to get my staff to find every single press mention of Brooks Running in any periodical on the planet. I have to get them, print them, clip them, get them to me so that I can read them, knowing in advance that Warren Buffett will have read that about Brooks Running and will come into our meeting ready to ask me about that. He will know more about Brooks Running than I will for that meeting. So, if you're talking to a prospect and you want to be able to pitch him, you almost have to know more about what he's doing than he does.
Well, and they may know more about what you're doing than you do. Because I've been selling software for a long time, and I can't tell you the number of times, oh yeah, I've been on your site. Tell me about this, 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 and this. And it's like, oh, they did spend their time, thank God, right? But they invested. So sometimes you get caught. If you don't know that they know, you're asking the wrong question. Those are big ones. In your role, it's like asking the right question about what they're doing in their day. And if they know your stuff, how it fits in, that's gold. It just gets you to the next level. It's that credibility and social selling is only one aspect of it. It's all that cold calls, all that other stuff that you got to get through.
Yeah, and I think a distinction here needs to be made. There's stuff that you're going to do because you want to build up your brand.
Yeah, that's it.
The brand of professional you.
Yeah.
Jim Keenan, I don't know if you've read or know of him. He wrote this book recently, Not Taught, but more broadly speaking, and something I fundamentally believe and agree with him on is you have the responsibility to build up your own brand of professionalism because you own that journey. Your manager can't tell you that journey. Your management can't give you that, your leadership. That's something you have to own. Your professional development and your perspective, your point of view of the world. And so part of the world of social selling is also building up your credibility. The things that you know, the things you understand, the things you can share, the perspectives that you can add on top of the conversations that are happening. So don't think of necessarily social selling as this thing or channel that you are using to build up your pipeline, which is important because you want to do that. But you also got to think about long term, about you as someone who adds value to this world, that has that unique story that stands out. Because those things do stand out over time. It's not something that's going to be immediate, but if you have a rigor to it, people will start to notice.
I would also just be curious about anyone that said to me, you have to reach out to 100 people on LinkedIn today. Like, why? What's the value? Like, I guess if that is the mandate of your organization, it would be interesting to ask what the thinking is there and like, what are we hoping, what's the goal or what are we hoping to do? Because I think we've sort of been dancing around this whole issue of customization versus automation tonight and just like blanketing anyone with, a certain title on LinkedIn with a generic message. Is that going to get you anywhere? And, I think it touches on that idea of certainly wanting to grow your network, but doing it in an organic way that's meaningful rather than like this forced march kind of way where it's like 200 dials and 100 LinkedIn. Like, I'm not sure,
That's so important. I mean, to get away from the numbers game, I do have numbers I set for myself, but they're not 100 of this or 200 of that. In the morning, I look for 5 interesting people I want to reach out to. I'll connect with them on LinkedIn with a very highly personalized message. And that's it. I shut it down. And I do everything else I do during the day. And my response rates on those highly personalized outreach is well over 95%. because it's personalized. People feel like I put some time and effort into it. It's relevant, what I have to share with them. And so that's what I mean when you think about the long term. Like now I've built up this incredible network, and obviously there's some vested interest because I'm building out this enterprise sales meetup community. But more broadly speaking, it could apply to anyone, any industry. If you want to build up your credibility, connect with people that matter, build up that network, and don't necessarily think about it as a numbers game. Because you think about it, it doesn't have to be 5, maybe even like 3 or just even 1. If you do that every day, how many more incredible connections have you made with people online?
I like that. I connected with you because of that, and I don't ever accept anyone's LinkedIn that I don't know. They're stalking me or some crazy thing.
That's great.
But you had some interesting articles, and it was a relevant message. One thing I really liked that you said, because we have this challenge in our inside, we don't call them inside, we call them SDR, business development organization that I work with to generate activity, is there's sort of this paralysis that I see that's different from my old school selling when all you had was the phone.
Right.
So I liked what you said about combining everything together as part of overall selling instead of, now we're doing social selling. I see them research so many things that they haven't called anybody and we don't have any meetings, but we sure know a lot about, this one prospect. So I sit on these calls and I love what you said about 3 things, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use that tomorrow. Maybe I'll give them 5 minutes, but 5 minutes they can research the prospect. So I thought
I think
that
that's
was
important because you get analysis paralysis or
That's what
whatever. Because we get
happens.
the new kids at the office that'll spend 45 minutes Googling up some new company or person. By the time they get there, they tell the customer what their problem is before they ever ask a question. You're like, no, too late.
The primary reason why a lot of sales reps have call reluctance is because they don't have a plan and they don't have a confidence in what they're about to do. And it could be that they don't have confidence because it doesn't work. Could be they don't have confidence because they haven't done it enough to make it something that they're comfortable doing. Right? So if you're spending 20, 25 plus minutes researching a prospect before you're reaching out, you're really just compensating for the fact that you don't feel like you have enough value to make that call. Right? So, and some of that it can be premeditated at scale, meaning you understand the persona, you understand the industry or the role you're calling into, and you can have that same challenge, status quo moment for every prospect. And then that 3 minutes or 5 minutes is spent customizing something about that, right? Maybe at the beginning of the call, you just say, "Hey, John, this is Matt from Outrage. First of all, go Tide, roll Tide, right? Second of all, whatever it is, right? Like remember last year for the national championship game, I was kind of curious what would happen. I went into my LinkedIn network and it was like Clemson and Alabama, and I just did a search for show me anyone that's an alumni of Clemson University or University of Alabama. And I just sent notes, and just said hey, whether or not you're a Rabbit fan, kind of big night tonight, hope you enjoy it, whatever. Somewhere marked, 95% response rate, right? From people that were all already first connections. It was one of those just random, let's just reconnect and kind of, but you never know, right? And so I think, we don't invest enough in helping people feel like they have a plan, and then feel confident in what they're about to do, so they're more likely to just do it.
I wanted to add one other.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Just a thought about kind of the manager's role and how that comes in. And you've probably heard the idea of the digital immigrant versus the digital native, right? And so I'll say that because a lot of us that are digital immigrants, right? We're still learning the language versus a whole generation of people that were born into the digital, mobile and device in hand. You guys are figuring it out. And so, I think we're often looking for, and I don't mean to say it's like a huge generational thing, but people are looking for this social media prescription to say, oh, if we do these things, it's going to generate X, and now we can measure the ROI, and it's really predictable. And it's not. It's a matter of kind of figuring out what's going to work for your organization, your product, your situation, and the tools are evolving every week, every month. And so I think that's what we're finding is, well, you got to throw a lot of stuff out there. And a lot of that may mean the extra effort to make yourself extraordinary. That's the, hey, we're going to try this. And if it works, then I'll take it to the manager and say, wow, this worked. And if it does, then they'll scale it to the organization. But I think sales has changed dramatically in the last five years or so, and we're figuring it out along the way.
You know, I'm betting I get 30 inbound LinkedIn requests a day. And 28 of those are hit the button. Now, I want you to join my network or whatever that, whatever.
You know what the shortcut is to find out very quickly which one's customized and which ones didn't?
How?
You know, if you're on LinkedIn and you go up to, like if you log into LinkedIn and on the upper right hand corner there'll be that little like invite icon. If there's people that have invited you, it'll say 2 or 4 or 8 or 1 or whatever. So like hover over that and it'll show the first 3 and then say show all. Click on show all and they all show up. And if they've customized something, there's a little blue conversation balloon that shows up in the upper right corner. So if you want, you could just say a rule: no customize, no connecty, right? And just like reject. And then if you hover over that blue balloon, it'll show you what they had written.
Didn't know that, but I would say there's a 99% chance that if it's canned language, I hit delete.
Yeah.
Because that's somebody who hasn't taken enough time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Look at the profile and say,
that's different.
you know, how do you feel about Duke basketball this year? Something so simple that makes a difference, makes you special, doesn't make you ordinary.
What does work for me and for other teams, the last note I think is when people cross channels on me. I notice that. Is that when people will do that personalization on LinkedIn, and even if I'm not good at responding on LinkedIn, because I'm not, and then they come to my inbox and reinforce that message.
Yeah.
I notice that in people that come to me, and we see performance in teams that do that when you take your message across different channels that resonate.
There's deep science. I mean, there's real research in terms of how that happens and the way our brain works, where you recognize something in one channel versus another, and so your brain receives that in a different way. Yep. And so the impact those multi-channel touches have, they accelerate the velocity and the speed at which you get to familiarity. Versus if you see those same messages just 5 times in email, your brain receives that in the same way, and it just doesn't build as much momentum. So
you just wrote about this, right?
What's that?
You just published something about this, right?
Probably.
Okay, because I'm like, either he's saying something I just read yesterday.
What we have people do is we have them, before they're going to make calls, we actually have them showing in regular mode. We have them go look up the person on LinkedIn, then we make the call, and then we send a quick email. And so we kind of get the 3 at once, and it is a lot higher rate of response.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to point out that it's 8:30 and I don't mind continuing, but I don't want anyone to feel, we're running over, and I
We
know.
have chickens we have to roost.
Well, there's chickens and storms. So, I mean, I'm not, by all means, feel free
Now,
to
once we
say
get
that.
the pigs, I'm out. I gotta do the pig.
Our hosts to have to stay too late, so, yeah. Are there any other questions from Matt before we wrap it up?
So speaking of LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me if we don't get a chance to talk tonight. If you've got follow-up questions, I will be more impressed if you customize the LinkedIn. Although as we were just saying, since we've all been here, I won't necessarily recommend all of you, but definitely feel free to connect, and would love to continue the conversation. I want to thank you guys very much for hosting this and for bringing out hosting me. This is great.
Yeah. Will you?
Just have a round of applause. Thanks, guys.
And again, thank you everyone for